Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for attending the ERP Common Computing Environment brief. It's really an honor, and I appreciate every one of you being here and giving us, me especially, the opportunity to share with you some of the experiences we've had with the ERP business case development. So as you were just told, the group that I work for, originally under Mr. Terry Carpenter at DISA, is the Requirements Analysis Office. Our mission is to take in new requirements from mission partners and then evaluate those from a business case standpoint for implementation, potentially as an enterprise service or an individualized service, as that may be. So that is, in fact, what we've done. We've completed the business case analysis, worked across DoD overall. And so what I'm going to share with you in the briefing today really kind of lays out what that process was from a historical standpoint, some of the technologies that are behind it, the timeline for how we did the business case. Then we want to lay down a description of the reference architecture that came from our analysis and requirements development, and then go directly into speaking on the business case processes that we went through, and specifically what we used to come up with the cost savings that we're going to be providing to our mission partners. So with that, we'll move forward. Okay. So the overall challenge that we have within the DoD obviously is on the cost side. But with the new administration that came in, Secretary of Defense Mattis issued a memo on the 17th of February 2017, calling out specifically the cross-enterprise consolidation of business activities. Now, he's been in the DoD a long time, and he kind of understands a lot about what it is that goes on and how things work across the services. And what he basically did is he kind of called out the duplicative business systems that are fairly pervasive across the DoD environment. So his memo specifically says, I want all the services and agencies now to start focusing on what it will take to start sharing across the enterprises these business capability, your services and your processes, so that we can be able to deliver better capability to the warfighter. And we want to take the investments from the back end and put those directly at the tip of the spear and improve the overall warfighter capability. So that's pretty much what we were tasked to do. Now, it's interesting the timing of this memo when it came out. This is in February of this year. And I want to take you back to March of 2016 when the Defense Business System Program Executive Offices met in our data center, DEC Ogden. And we actually went through all of the efforts from the Army, Air Force, et cetera, DLA, name your favorite agency, who's currently hosting an ERP in DISA. And we started looking at, well, what is the smart thing to do here? So we began back in March with kicking off a formal study through the RAO process to be able to do a thorough requirements analysis followed by a thorough business case analysis for presentations back to the PEOs. And so that's what we did. So in March to July, my team and I as the IPT lead specifically met with all ERP mission partners and stakeholders to be able to collect their requirements. And so we engaged directly with Army, Air Force, DLA at all different levels, the executive level all the way down to the guys that are coding the ERP systems. And so it took us that much time to quantify exactly every one of the requirements that they felt was necessary in order to go ahead and put or build that next generation of ERP using multi-tenancy and using the converged architectures that are now currently available. So lots of discussions for a good long period, and then from July until December of 2016, we then went into the business case analysis and designing of the architecture based upon all the requirements that we had collected. So it's about a year long. Fast forward, now we're here in February, and we're all kind of converging at the same point, okay? How can we do this better, faster, cheaper for the warfighter? Now, I told you that we did 6-7 months of requirements analysis. During that time, we sat down and we worked with DEC-Ogden quite a bit, and we worked with all the mission partners. And one of the things that came out directly was how are we doing business today? How we're doing business today is we are, at DISA, we're taking a letter estimate from our customers. We're doing which requires a system requirements form. All the technical inputs have to come into us. They sign off on the amount of money, and we go put it in place for them, right? And that's what's created this bottom row right here, where you see Army ERP primary, secondary, across to agency ERPs, primary, secondary. That's where we are right now. We're in silos. We're in silos within DISA. We're in silos off-premise of DISA. That is how we have built ourselves, and it's pretty much the way we do business today. But the point I want to give to you here a little bit, for those of you who may not be as familiar with ERP architectures and the newer technologies, I want to talk about multi-tenancy here a little bit and what's involved there. So using the converged architectures, which is basically we're taking compute, network, and storage, and instead of each one of those elements being a line of business within DISA, the technology now allows you to have one person that can control each of those aspects of the ERP. So now we've just consolidated labor. We've consolidated processes. We've consolidated the needs that drive up the time to solution. We've got one person. We've got one system, one finger that infects the change across the whole entire environment. That's the technology we have today. And so we looked at this and we said, okay, everybody's in their own silo. What can we do to kind of break this mold? Because everybody's kind of, their feet are in quicksand today, all right? We got to get them out of that. And so the idea that was basically, and it came from the services and agencies themselves. They said, Army, we've got 5 and 7 ERP programs out there. Maybe we ought to start just talking to ourselves and start figuring out what it is we can do to share resources, both programming, system resources, processes, et cetera. Now, of course, it's a challenge because the ERPs are all built around financial, medical, warehousing, logistics. It depends on what that application is built for. But the underlying systems certainly are supported by the multi-tenancy constructs. And so what we're proposing is that they start moving out of their silos into the common architecture, the CCE, and they can do it first by start sharing themselves into their own multi-tenant environments. So that's one part of the business case that we identified early on, okay? And so moving into this environment is kind of like that first step. And I'll get over to, when we get further along in the brief, I'll kind of show you what the more details in the timeline are. So now, on the left side, at the bottom, you can see we've gotten ourselves into we're in a multi-tenant environment now, okay? And one of the benefits that immediately started leaping out to us when we were doing the requirements was, well, okay, you got if all the agencies and the services are talking to themselves and they're learning how to share those system resources, the middleware, the databases, all these different pieces, because that's generally driving a lot of the economies of scale for the cost savings. Then now the next part is we want to start looking across all these services and agencies to the individual applications. So where business intelligence or Citrix or Soulman, GRC, the names are not important, but the modules within the ERPs, all these things now become shareable. One of the key elements that we pulled out of the requirement was the word collaboration. In order to affect this, you have to have a rich collaborative environment where you can start sharing across and talking across all the services and agencies to now start borrowing and sharing code, resources, et cetera, to help speed up the delivery of those things to the warfighter. So that's where what we were talking about is now what mechanism do we use to get that in? And I'll touch on that a little bit later, but that becomes important. Working across all the services and agencies to populate and share where they are. DLA just recently started reaching across to Army and said, you know what, you guys got one of the best warehouse modules out there. Let's start collaborating. Let's start sharing this. And so there's a benefit there, which my business case did not get into, but it is one of those things that add greatly to the overall cost savings that we would love to be able to quantify. It's very tough to do unless you're doing an exact study on that savings of that kind. But anyway, those are the types of things that even now they're starting to look at and carry through for cost savings. So once you're in this environment and you're sharing, now it becomes very easy to reach across and start pushing that code out to your individual instantiations for staging and production once you've gotten out of the T&D's environment. So the T&D became important to begin with. Sharing within that test and development through collaboration, it was one of the key elements to help get you the cost savings and time savings. And then ultimately, we'll push through to get to the staging and production implementations. So hopefully that explains a little bit about kind of the overall approach, explains a little bit about multi-tenancy, and I talked a little bit about convergence. So if there's any other questions, please, you can certainly let me know. So again, we spent 6-7 months doing a requirements analysis. And we started looking at really what was it that's going to be able to enable all the things that our mission partners want from us. And the crown jewel of it all is right here on this slide. Okay? This is the ERP Portfolio Office. And it was one of those obvious things that just kind of leaps out at you that says, you know, if the way I'm doing business today is I'm taking in a letter estimate after doing the SRC and all of that work, and it's causing me to build silos, how am I going to get around that? How can I do this better? And so the idea was put forward that we will, in DISA, build the portfolio office that would be hosted by both DISA and DBS PEO organizations, kind of a 60-40 mix. So 40% DISA, 60% PEOs. And the point of all that would be to start beginning the task of governance. Because everybody's building their own silos. They have their own capabilities, their own tool sets, their own resources. It's time to start doing things a little bit differently. That's why I put down here at the bottom, if you can read it, Conway's Law. Okay? So organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of communication structures of these organizations. That's true, because that's what we're doing today. We're just rebuilding cookie cuttering ERP systems. We got to change that. So you put in the portfolio office, all right, you start increasing the governance oversight, and then start looking at standards development, SLA requirement, and service coordination. So that body then can come back to, through regular meetings, they can say, you know what, I want Nagios as my monitoring tool now. And I'm going to put that in place for all the ERPs, and everybody can agree to that, right? If that meets the need, because it's all about economies of scale. It's about standardization. It's about identifying what are the tool sets that I need to get my business done, but drive down costs overall. So that governance piece becomes especially important for the solution that we're proposing. And obviously, subject matter expertise, all right? We reached out to Oracle, we've reached out to SAP, and we've talked with those industry partners, and we understand now what it would take to bring them on contract and be a resource to not only the ERPs themselves, but to DISA to help facilitate and build all the different constructs of DevOps and high availability in order to increase efficiencies and make things better for our customers. So, yeah, DISA, we kind of get it. We're a service provider, and we're kind of good at that. But those are the experts, and those experts with mission partners and with DISA all working together is how we can be able to pull a lot of these together. So, portfolio office then, it's all about the development roadmap. What do we want to build? What are the systems? How we're going to build those using the standards that the governance office has, and also they can provide the feedback and be an arm back to the PEOs to say, okay, these are the things that we are proposing as solutions for your environment. You tell us if this meets the need. And that's how we establish that communications. The next is certainly the service development, because as a hosting provider, you have cyber defense, the common services, utility services, those type things. We want to be able to now coordinate what I was saying earlier, the code sharing. How could we be able, to do that better? Build libraries and repositories so that all this can be shared collaboratively across the environment. And of course, then there's migration coordination, and that's one of the key elements. And you'll see this in the timeline at the end of the brief. ERPs are big, they're massive. I think you all know that fairly well. So it takes time to program the funds, to plan the development, to put the systems in place. These systems do not turn on a dime, not like the cloud environment, right? And so that migration path, and to do it smartly, so the warfighter still gets his needs met, but at the same time, we're not double billing or dramatically driving up costs unnecessarily. So those are key. Now, I spent, we did a lot of work on the requirements collection, again, 6-7 months looking at all that. And the feedback that we got was pretty blunt. It was pretty straightforward, all right? Because we started with, well, how are we doing business today? Well, I told you, we're building ERPs in silos. It's worse than that, okay? Not only are we putting our ERPs in silos in DISA decks, our T&Ds are split somewhere else geographically, not even connected here, okay, in most instances. And you're in a primary location. Your primary's in one location, but your Coop, you're pretty much Coop and DR somewhere else, not with a secondary in some cases, all right? Some do have direct Coop and DR solutions, some don't. But when you're broken up and geographically separated, okay, it's pretty tough to come together with a cohesive, standard way of process and coordination to do what we call the DevOps solution, right? Now, we're a service provider. We stop at pretty much the operating system. We do databases for the some application support when paid to do it, but pretty much our goal in life is just to run the networks and the systems, keep things secure, and then let Joint Force Headquarters-dod do the defense, right? That's what we do. And then our mission partners are all about coming up and doing the application development, the middleware, the databases, certainly test and development. Those are key parts of all this. But when it's all broken up and scattered, you're not going to get very far very quickly. So one of the key parts of this was let's start bringing these in, at least from a process standpoint, so we're standardized and have a cohesive, automated process through DevOps. So the intent here then is to start standing up the multi-tenant zones A and B, and I'm using the security terms Zone A, Zone B. In the write-up, you'll see Zone B is development, Zone A is test, but it's a little more fluid than that. So I don't want to get wrapped around terms, but I'm using the security terms when I say Zone A, Zone B, and that's how we've architected. You'll see in the reference architecture how that kind of breaks out. So obviously, then the next step is to get the automation for the DevOps process. We have it going from literally from a sandbox test environment all the way through to production. So you go from sandbox to development to test to staging. Staging could include quality assurance, user reviews, those different parts, and then straight into full-blown production. So there's different stages along this entire path. And then, of course, standardized security management and test tools. This is one thing that I personally want to thank the Air Force for, because they were very cognizant of the fact that when they had their tools for the 3 different programs, they were immediately looking at all the best-of-breed tools to share across all of their 3 programs initially. And see, so when they started calling out what those tool sets were best of breed, it kind of helped. And then you start looking at, well, what's the Army want to do? And what are their tool sets, et cetera. So that was the idea for standardizing all of that. Again, this would feed back into a governance process so that it becomes standard across all the environments rather than just a single Army, Air Force, et cetera, type implementation. Okay. And then now we want to know what other key element was the standardized common services or utility services and cyber defense. So if you were here a couple of hours ago, you heard Dr. Travis talk exactly about this, right? DISA has looked across all the decks for all the years, and they found duplication like you wouldn't believe. Each deck choosing their own tool sets, all doing the same thing. So now what he's doing, he's starting to pull in all the NetOps solutions, the monitoring tools, all the configuration management performance, all those different tool sets, and he's starting to bring those in and leveraging economies of scale to drive down the costs and to be more effective in the data that we collect and use to manage. There's no reason why that cannot be standardized along with that for the ERP environments, and that is key. Again, another key element of of what our requirements said. So then next on the list really got down to VDI. Why VDI? Well, it's one of the more secure capabilities for privileged user and standard user access into the environment. Citrix is widely used, and there's a good example, but other places don't. They're VPN tunneling in. They have different ways of accessing the environments for the users and privileged users, and so that becomes problematic. I mean, it's got to be. There's a tremendous cost there to maintain different modules, in different ways, and managing that code from everybody else. So DISA will be providing VDI solutions, standard set, And over time, we would begin to migrate that capability into the ERP environments. So now that becomes the standard way for both privileged user and regular user, to access their environment. And then obviously SDN, software-defined networking. There are stages to this. In other briefings, you'll hear that DISA is starting to pull together the SDN solution. For the ERPs, we would initially start out with network automation, leveraging a lot of the tools and capabilities that already exist in cloud and other places, and then build to the official SDN solution that's 5 years out. But again, it's the network interfaces and automation provisioning and standardization at the network level, which is going to make this more secure than what we're experiencing today with individualized implementations. Next. So now I want to share with you one of the primary pictures from the reference architecture that was developed. We did the requirements analysis. We then took it to the next level, and working again across the DoD and mission partners and with industry partners, we sat down and tied every one of the requirements into a reference architecture that actually provided some of the or provides the solutions to a lot of the problems that we were hearing. Like I said before, a lot of the mission partners have the development and test completely outside of DISA, outside of the network. Even when they are in DISA, the AO is over that environment, not the DISA AO. So now security there's two different sets of security, and one has to now say, okay, trust it here, not whatever, and then work through all those issues. So the idea is that with a secure process using DevOps and automation, we would be able to manage this more cost effectively by leveraging this type of environment. This slide that I'm sharing with you is a couple of steps down from what the overall architecture looks like. So I want to call that out to you so you don't jump off and say, oh, but Zone B and Zone A. Well, yeah, Zone B and Zone A is there. Excuse me. But above that, you have all your firewalls, routers, DMZs that get you to this point. Now, the key element that was built into the reference architecture here was, above all, collaboration and security. Those were the primary elements that we pulled together. So what we're showing you here is that in a Zone B for development, you would have the ability then to change where those cross marks are there, the VRF, the virtual router. The end user would be able to control those. He would be able to open up his firewall, say if he's Army, to the Air Force, and start sharing warehouse modules, coding, and development. All right? That's something that's not being done today. Or if it is, it's taking a month to get the approval processes in place to do that, right? So that's one of the key elements here, is that using virtualization, we want to be able to collaborate within this environment and allow the user the control on his dev and test side so that he can collaborate across all these environments. Now, key to all that is that if you're going to automate this process, you have to have the deep packet inspection capabilities across all these environments to scan tool sets like Fortify and other things that HBSS. Those are all the things that we had costed to put in this element or into the reference architecture, so that then we could apply automation and start stepping code through each of these different stages. So again, I'm using Zone B and A as from the security standpoint. Certainly you're doing all of your development in B and some of your testing in B, but there's different types of testing being done in Zone A. And of course, you would then go to a staging, which could be specific to quality management, some sort of process review in different systems. JITIC, again, ties in to this part, since we're talking about ACAT level programs. Their ability to come in to these testing environments becomes key, and with the ability for the end user to control both the dev and the test, that capability is going to be there for them. So that's the key part. The thing that's going to save most of the money, though, is that when you have the scanning and deep packet inspection, now what you can do is you can start having those scanners outside of these 4 areas scanning into that area, into those zones. So now I don't have to make special copies for each of my scanning tool sets. I'm only using one. So that drives down the cost significantly overall. Okay. So those are the concepts and ideas that we've put here. If there's any questions about kind of the overall, I have those in backup slides. And if anybody has any questions, I can share those with you. Okay. So now we've talked a lot about the ERP systems across the Army, the Navy, Marine Corps, all the agencies. We've shared with them what our vision is to drive down the overall costs and improve things. What I'm showing for you or sharing with you right now is pretty much where do the ERPs lie, and why is it important for an ERP to cloud those other areas. So like I said, Dr. Travis was just here in this theater not 2 hours ago talking about the NetOps and other utility services that he's building to secure the environments. That is what is being done across the cloud, the ERP, and in the commercial cloud space. So DISA is now working very diligently to integrate and automate across all these different environments. So when you order an ERP system, you start at the self-service portal, and you can go order your ERP. You can add resources to it, take it away, whatever it is you want to do in order to scale that environment. For the cloud, it's the same thing, and you can help. And then the cyber defense and shared services would be standardized across all these different environments, even into the SCCA, the Secure Cloud Computing Architecture, which gives the framework, a security framework, for which the cloud service providers to operate. We could extend those common services and cyber defense tools into that environment as well. So now you're taking the capability of managing your data off-premise, and that could be a T&D, and then pushing it down into the on-premise, which is the production and staging, if that's what our mission partners intend to do. And of course, the key element here is the abstraction control and SDN management plane. Those are there to really realize the automation, the benefit of automation, and to allow that whatever vendor we bring in at the bottom, be it on the cloud, other legacy systems, or ERPs, can tie into that, and mission partners can freely access those resources as they need, either as privileged user or as user. It will not matter. But the key element, and I think Dr. Travis did a good job of explaining this, is that he's all about automation and putting that in place. These are the automation elements to help get us to better, faster, cheaper in managing the environments. So in the upper left-hand corner, what becomes really important is the C2 command and control. Now you want to be able to obviously affect security, policies, procedure, processes, execute code, do what you need to do to help secure the environment. So they obviously have a direct line into this environment to help secure the environment. But and the BCAP is really the cap as you know it today. And then we have the AFCEA up there, which I already mentioned, as a cloud architecture for securing the cloud service provider space. Now, the part that's very, very much an important part to the DoD I want to call out to you is those two little arrows at the bottom, that right up above CDSP and Common Shared. It says workload migration. We have all of our workload, we have legacy workload, obviously, at the data centers today. And so the idea is that we're not going to be staying there. A lot of these environments are going to migrate out either to the ERPs or they're going to go to the cloud ultimately. So that became one of the requirements we had to deal with specifically, because what you want to be able to do is if you're a big database user and not a formal ERP, you may want to go to the ERP environment because the multi-tenancy and development capabilities we're going to provide, either turnkey or natively in the environment, that's going to help you do your job better, faster, quicker, and help you operate your application in a more cost-effective manner. You may not want to be in the cloud, but if you are going to go to the cloud and you have scaling or elasticity requirements for a cloud application, that certainly is there. But then the key element becomes, how do you scale from ERPs to outside or from cloud to outside? And that is how it's all being accomplished, is through the CAP and being able to extend those common services from the local environment or from the on-premise environment to the off. So that hopefully that kind of gives you a good overall view of what it is what DISA is currently trying to accomplish. Okay, so I want to get into the actual business case. I mean, it all sounds good. Standing up here, deep packet inspection, converged architecture, multi-tenancy, high availability. Those are the great buzzwords, but unless you're going to save money overall or be able to provide the efficiencies, it's not really a worthwhile endeavor. So the idea, well, what we did is our business case. I'll just get you the details for you. So we went back and we looked at all of the ERP programs that sit in DISA today. So we know what hardware platforms they have, support infrastructure they have. We know what all the costs are. Basically, we know their CPU, memory, network utilization. We know all that, just because we have to handle it on a day-to-day basis. And so we took for multi-tenancy, we looked at the networking, resource utilization, and storage. And we looked at those and we said, okay, what we can do then is now go back and look at the programs and see if what is their resource utilization. Because in multi-tenancy, what you have to do is you have to understand that application so well, you know exactly what the application profile looks like. And what I mean by that is you know how much resources it's using on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually basis. And you have to map that across an entire time frame so that you know when to add or subtract those resources. Because the whole point behind multi-tenancy is being able to take away those resources and save costs. That puts it back on us, the service provider, obviously. But this is a just-in-time computing environment, basically. And so you pull in those resources when you're getting to your end of the quarter, end of year, whatever your processing cycle is for that application, you know exactly what to put in place to support that need. The rest of the time, you just pull that off, and there's no charge for it. You're saving money, and that's the entire goal. So that's what we looked at is all the resource utilizations from memory, CPU, storage, and looked at if the utilization rates for one major ERP program. And we found that by consolidating, by taking resources out and consolidating that down to like an 80% watermark, we could save 35% off the regular bill of that particular customer. That's what we found. Now, every environment's different. You have medical, you have financial, you have logistical, you have all different types of ERPs. They're all sized differently, okay? They have different application or appliances, and so they're different. So I can't go back in and say, 35% off of everybody. No, what we said is that by level setting those environments that we looked at, we can sit there and say, okay, if each one were spending $20 million based on that consolidation of resources, it would be a 35% savings. So that savings adds up to about $7 million per program, right? This is the payback that has to come into play. And when you start looking at that payback for each program times the number of systems you have in a multi-tenant environment, those numbers start to get pretty big pretty quick. So, long story short, I'll share with you that we built our model around the multi-tenancy. We ran the numbers for a 20% savings to a 35% savings. Across the board, what we found is that the programs, while they're spending more between, say, 2019 to 2022, they're right immediately thereafter, they've paid everything back, and their growth or their cost savings starts going up dramatically after that point. So the payback period is 4 years. Okay, that is what we have directly observed using live data, real data from our customers at the deck. Now, other mission partners may find that a little bit less, but I'm willing to stand in front of this because I ran the numbers myself along with other engineers, and that's a pretty good cost savings. So that was one element of it. The next part of it was, of course, the Coop DR. What I kind of glossed over a little bit was that part of the business case was all about high availability, and that is being able to put two instantiations of your ERP in one place, but then having sub-second response time to be able to manage those two environments as one application, even though they're geographically separated. That's the idea behind high availability. It's difficult to achieve, just not because of the DoD policy, security, all the the bad actors we all know about. It's really because of physics. You have to be within 25 miles of each other to have a true high available solution set in place. And with the data centers for the DoD spread across the United States, it's very, very difficult to achieve. But we looked at solutions there where you could still put two instantiations of an ERP in the same location, and therefore isolating you at least from security and security and systems level issues by adding that redundancy. You could then take a copy of that configuration and put that out geographically separate from each other and achieve basically the same Coop DR solution sets. But then you're multi-tenanted across 4 different sites, and then you can save a tremendous amount of funding that way. Again, we went back and looked at all the European environments. They generally, when they were resourced and sized, they were pretty much, we found about 30% was what they had to put in place in order to coop their standard environment. So that just goes away. That's cash back to the programs right there, and 30% is significant. So you put all that together, $7 million and about another almost $4 million. That's $11 million per program, and add that every single year, that's the dollar savings we presented. But like I said, when you start looking at the collaboration, improved security, and the ability to share code and efficiencies, that part we didn't measure. That's something I think that the program offices are going to want to pursue beyond what we're talking about here. And I think that's where the governance and the resource sharing then becomes a force multiplier, if you will, on top of what this business case is saying for everyone. Okay. 10 minutes? Okay. So, all right, so I'll spend a couple minutes here, and then we'll go to questions. So what we've presented to senior leadership is looking at the top. The top portion is what DISA needs to do to field capability for the ERP environments. And then below, we've talked about what the PEOs need to do from a timing standpoint to be able to affect this capability. So remember, all right, so at the top, what we talked about is establishing the portfolio office. That could begin immediately, and DISA has made steps to start that up. The next, of course, is to get VDI and SDN capabilities in place. The VDI reflects current program capabilities today, and when that can be available, privileged user is in fact available today and is becoming mandatory. Because of the security, it's really a great tool to thwart our adversaries. So the key there is getting those in place, and then SDN more so with network automation, collaboration, standing that up in parallel with effecting the architecture, the reference architecture that I showed you at least one slide through, and getting that stood up, because standing that up is what, and bringing all those elements together, then the programs, as their tech refresh capabilities allow, or timing of their deployments, that's when they would begin to consolidate into a dedicated Army or dedicated Air Force environments, and then merge into multi-tenant T&D that's purple. Basically, it's where everybody kind of comes together at the forefront. So we were proposing in quarter 3 of 19, that's pretty much when they can begin, or even now, start looking at that process to get there. But again, like I said, ERPs are huge, they're massive, they don't turn on a dime, and this takes a lot of planning, and frankly, a lot of program funding has to be put in place to help set up all this and make it happen. So that helps, and then of course your non-multi-tenant production remains in effect. It just draws away over time until finally somewhere around 22, you can probably get everybody into this environment that it needs to be. So with that, that's the end of the presentation. How much time do we have? 7 minutes? Okay. So I'm going to take one more minute. I mentioned before. Okay, well, you don't. All right, we don't seem to have the backup slides. My apologies. We're off for some reason. But anyway, so you do get continuing education credits. We do want to be able to continue the brief for the full hour. Unfortunately, that's one of the requirements, just so you all know. But if there are any questions, please let me know what your question is. I'll communicate that back to the audience, and we'll answer whatever we can do. Okay, I think we're long enough.
Curious what the automation tools were.
The automation tools? Okay, great question, because the example I gave you was kind of SAP-centric, but we are vendor agnostic, all right? It is really an an Oracle world or an SAP world, depending, whatever decisions have already been made long before now, right? And as a host or as a service provider, we're here to serve the warfighter. We don't distinguish between the two. So the question is, what are the tools that we have in the environment? Today, you would get the standard tool sets as you would in the cloud, and that would be available to you. Now, if you're Oracle, I've noticed that there's a whole different set of tool sets, the OEM, the Oracle solution tools that they bring along. SAP has their own set. So it would be more custom to what it is you want. But then I'm going to kind of point back to the governance solution, all right? Because ultimately, depending upon which environment you're in, the governance folks are going to determine what the exact tool is. But today, it would be the standard tool sets that you're getting out of the ERP environments today at, say, DEC Ogden or St. Louis, Mechanicsburg, those places. All right? And those are going to evolve. I mean, listening to Dr. Travis earlier, he was talking about the sunsetting of a lot of these tool sets and then bringing in more solutions to better fit the environment. That's the key part, is that then the PEOs could influence those decisions and request different and more capable tool sets that they feel meet their need come into play. And there still would be no requirement that says you can't bring in your own tool, specifically if it's a development type tool that may be unique. Okay, but at least you want the standard interfaces across all the environments and the health, welfare management, configuration management. You want those tools to be standard. So, okay, do we have any other questions? Okay, and all right, so I'm going to go here. All right. So and then yeah.
When you showed your projected timeline a while ago for the ERP, I didn't see the Navy and the Marines in there. I saw the Air Force and Army. Is that because of engine, or is that just not at the level of being? It's like they're next to the last slide, I think. Yeah, that one right there.
Yeah. So that's a great question. They are current. Navy just by chance happens to be out of the DISA environment, and that's just how it's been set up. All right, that's why it works that way, and why we didn't put them on there now. See, the key is you've got to sow the seed. You've got to plant that seed and get that tree to grow. And with the environments we have today, we can consolidate easily 9, if not more, ERP programs into this environment. And so the more you start adding, the greater that cost savings becomes, the more attractive it becomes. So what we were trying to show is that the existing workload that's in DISA today, if they followed this timeline, they would be able to meet the objectives, as we pointed out, as the 35% and the 30% cost savings that they can get. And our whole business case was built around that, those numbers. And again, reemphasizing, there's a 4 years where you're paying to stand this up, but thereafter the cost savings are tremendous. It's in the hundreds of millions of dollars that are saved. So, all right. And all right, and something I didn't call out to help is planning, T&D migrations, early adopters, and production migration. It's just called out as optionals and opportunities for the customers to migrate. All right, so I'm going to call this back up again because a lot of the environments or the requirements that we collected came directly from the mission partner. And tell me when we're done. 1 minute? Okay. So I'll just wrap up real quick. Unless there's any other questions, please stop me if there are any questions. But again, they were very vocal about, well, DISA does this and DISA does that. And we really need collaboration. We need to be able to get through the wickets quicker. We can't do that at DISA. The whole point behind this reference architecture is to take those limits away and to bring both the security folks, the systems, and the developers together so that through the DevOps process we can be able to get things more quickly through the process. I've never seen organizations that are more tightly coupled from a development standpoint than the ERP environments. They're very sensitive to the code, to the build and release process, and it's very painful for them today when they're scattered across all the different, scattered across geographically to be able to function effectively. So the time savings alone would be a tremendous benefit. So, and that's what this is to represent. Okay.